Welcome everyone to another episode of Dynamics Corner, the podcast where we dive deep into all things Microsoft Dynamics. Whether you're a seasoned expert or just starting your journey into the world of Dynamics 365, this is your place to get insights, learn new tricks, and understand what is AL-Go. I'm your co-host, Kris.
And this is Brad. This episode is recorded on August 28th, 2024. Kris. AL-Go.
Who's Al?
I was going to say, do you know how to spell AL-Go?
Who's Al?
And where did he go?
Yeah, where did Al go? Yeah.
With us today, we had the opportunity to speak with someone who knows all about AL-Go to hear some valuable insights on how AL-Go can be used to make your life a little more efficient. With us today, we had the opportunity to speak with Freddy Kristiansen.
I'm just getting the chair.
Perfect.
Oh, my bird is flying away. Okay.
Where's it going?
So this one is it's measuring how the air quality is.
Oh,
and
wow.
When it sits on top of the upwards, the air quality is fine in here. If it's hanging down and dying, it symbolizes that the air is bad. When it's just like that, it needs power.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, as if we're talking with you and the bird starts to go down, I'll start to get afraid. I need to get one of those.
So
that's
it's a thing from back in the days where they actually had canaries in the mines.
Yes.
Yes.
And when they passed out, they knew it was about time to get up.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was thinking about, the canary in the mine. I need to get one of those. I don't know if I want one of those, though, with the air. I don't know if I want to know the air quality. Maybe I just want to just go and not know. Well, I won't keep an eye on it then because it needs power. Good afternoon. Thank you for talking with us this afternoon. I've been looking forward to speaking with you. Always about something that's of great interest to me and many others I know as well. But before we jump into it, for those that may not know, can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
I am Freddy Kristiansen. My official role is a principal product manager, but the title that I like to go with is a principal technical evangelist. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to make partners use the latest and greatest of the tools that we have for DevOps and Docker, and basically trying to help partners develop in as efficient way as possible without spending time on tedious and other things that they may be able to avoid spending time on, right?
No, it's true. And I like the technical evangelist term because I know you have been working with the product for a long time. Even back in the early days when I started out, I saw, some information circling from you as well. So I do like the term, and I do follow everything that you promote and push, which is good. One of the things that I wanted to talk with you about is you talk about with partners working with the latest tools so that they can become more efficient with the development and not have to do some of the tedious work, with Docker, and then also with the GitHub repositories as well. But as far as Docker is concerned, you work with the BCContainerHelper tool. So can you tell me a little bit about BCContainerHelper, what it's used for, and what its position is?
Yeah, so back in the days, I think around Tech Days 2017, so that's 7 years ago, we launched the first way to run Business Central in containers at Tech Days that year. Me, together with Tobias Fenster and another guy called Jakub Vanak. And we had a session where we demonstrated these things. The problem was that running containers would require you to like create this Docker run statement that easily would fill out the screen with different parameters and other things. And we really did not want all AL developers to be Docker experts. So created this PowerShell module called BCContainerHelper that was supposed to make it life easier. And well, I think first version of that nav container helper was shipped back in 2018, and a number of versions of that. Later that became BC Container Helper, and it's a huge pile of cool functionality that partners can use, really. Really unstructured in the way that it's kind of the only shipping vehicle I've had to, whenever there's something like, how do we publish to an online environment? Well, I'll just ship that in BC Container Helper, and then it's easier because that module is always used by people making DevOps and stuff like that. So we're looking to change stuff in that sense, but we can talk about that later. The module is fairly big today. It has a lot of functionalities. Has over 2 million downloads. That doesn't mean that we have 2 million AL developers, obviously. It means that it's frequently downloaded in DevOps pipelines and workflows. So in a good day, you'll have several thousand downloads of the module from pipelines, probably.
No, it's great. It is a tool that I personally use daily as well. And I use it in a number of fashions. I think, as you had mentioned, it's a great tool. There is a lot to it, and I do appreciate, I've been using it for many years, and it has gotten easier because, as you had mentioned, there's two aspects of it. There's the PowerShell aspect of it, and then also the Docker aspect of it. And becoming a Docker expert is a little difficult, I think you can say at some points, using Docker desktop versus Docker engine and the like. So it gets a little challenging when you're just trying to develop and publish. So having the tool set to make it easier does help expedite and become a little bit more efficient with development. With the containers and the images, how is that structured as far as being able to pull down versions of Business Central or Nav? How far back can we go to create containers for versions of Business Central or Nav? I know early on I used to be able to work it with Nav from the images.
Yeah, so one thing is what's supported, another thing is what's possible, right?
Yes.
Supported is obviously the versions of NAV and Business Central that we support today. I actually don't know if is there still support for the latest NAV version, or is that our support today? I can't remember. But anyway, it should work, and it should work all the way back to, I know people who have created Docker containers with NAV 2013, maybe even NAV 2009, R2. But obviously it's not something that I do a lot to support or maintain or anything like that. There's only one Docker image really out there, like you can find in the Docker Hub or in the Microsoft Container Registry. You can find Docker images, and you'll find one Docker image that matches the operating system. And every month we will ship a new Docker image that matches the supported Windows versions right now. Windows Server 2016, Windows Server 2019, and Windows Server 22. I actually think Windows Server 2019 is no longer supported. But as long as the Windows team will ship updates to that, I will ship updates to, we will ship updates to the generic image. So if anybody is using Windows Server 2019, they'll be able to get a matching image of the Business Central generic image. In the beginning, we created like images for every single nav/Business Central version. The problem we had there was that we had to redo that every month. When there was a new Windows version, we had to redo like the entire matrix of supported nav BC versions times the different Windows versions. And back then, Docker also shipped containers for all the intermediate versions, and it became like a huge matrix, and I had like, computers running for multiple days to create those things. And we changed that, and instead of creating these fixed images, we create one generic image to rule them all. And then we, instead of shipping the Business Central bits in containers, we ship that as artifacts. And these artifacts are then stored in a storage account, and that storage account can be accessed either from BCContainerHelper by getting a BC artifact URL, or you can also just download it with a normal invoke REST method if you want to do that from PowerShell or whatever. And the artifacts are split in two. There's an app part and a platform part, or a localization part and a platform part. And the localization part is then multiplied by the different countries that we ship. So you'll be able to download a US version of a specific version of Business Central, and there'll be a manifest file in that. And inside of that manifest file, there'll be a pointer to what platform this Business Central localization version runs with, and then you can download that, and you'll have the bits to create the container with. So yeah,
it's all magic. I know it sounds like all magic because I can just create a new container, put in the version that I'm looking for and the country that I'm looking for, and I can see it download the artifact and the images, and it creates a new Business Central implementation for me. And as you had mentioned, there are a number of tools available within the BC Container Helper, PowerShell, script, I guess, or commandlet, everywhere from creating containers, pulling out runtimes of libraries or apps if someone wanted to create a specific runtime for a version, and the artifacts as well. And the earliest I've been able to use it was 2015. I haven't tried anything before 2015, but I was able to use BCContainerHelper to pull down the image and load a container from a CD, or not from a CD, but from a DVD download of 2015. And it worked quite well if you just load the prerequisites into the system. You had mentioned, and I had seen you post and talk about BCContainerHelper and some changes that you're going to make or have been made to it in conjunction with AL-Go, and you alluded to that a few months ago. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yep. Well, it's not changes per se. It's but it is changes. But so what we're going to do is, since there are functions for like all kinds of things in ContainerHelper, and we want to structure that in a better way. And to do that, we will take the functions that are needed to create containers or whatever, and put them in probably one PowerShell library. Some of the functions that are used to, let's say, publish to online environment, we'll probably put that into GitHub Actions, maybe, or in another PowerShell library. I don't know, but really so with AL-Go for GitHub, which is the tool that we shipped a few years ago, we're kind of seeking to be able to do everything that partners needs from a DevOps solution. And back in the days with ContainerHelper was really used to give partners a module so that they could build all of the things that they would use in a DevOps solution. But it's suboptimal to have 3,000 or 4,000 partners sit and create their own workflows and their own pipelines and their own mechanisms to like upgrade and all of these things. It's better to have a managed solution where everything is handled in that one. And that means that we're going to look at AL-Go for GitHub and see what functions of BCContainerHelper is that one using. It is creating containers for development environment, it's creating online environments and all kinds of things. And we're going to take these functions out of ContainerHelper and put in other PowerShell modules or in GitHub Actions, other things, so that eventually AL-Go for GitHub will no longer need BCContainerHelper. And what's the future then of BCContainerHelper? Well, it will be set on hold or on whatever, I don't know. I'm not going to maintain it anymore. When all the functionality that is needed for people's DevOps solutions are available in other locations, then the need for BCContainerHelper would only be to really work with these old CAL containers or things that are not really needed today. And the idea there is to stop supporting BCContainerHelper at the day where basically the cutoff day is when AL-Go no longer needs BCContainerHelper. But rest assured, we're not going to just move all the functionality into AL-Go and force everybody to use AL-Go. That's not the purpose. The purpose of this exercise is really to make sure that we have something that we can support and work with, and we will suggest people that they use what's called a managed DevOps solution, which I include AL-Go for GitHub, I include ALOps, I include Alpaca, and there might be more. The reason for that is that partners of varying sizes can really focus on providing customer value instead of developing workflows and pipelines and all of these things. And we're of course working with partners to make sure that AL-Go supports as much as this is possible. Waldo is probably doing the same on ALOps, and Cosmo is doing the same on Alpaca, ending up having these three really good solutions for these things. Obviously, AL-Go is free, so that one, if you want a solution that doesn't cost you anything, AL-Go for GitHub is one solution. ALOps has a price tag on it, and Alpaca has the same. Alpaca and ALOps are both on Azure DevOps, and AL-Go is only on GitHub. So that's some of the things that people or partners should think about when they select what solution to use. I had a survey not long ago where I asked people what kind of DevOps solution they use, and approximately 50% of all partners are still using something they built themselves. And I'm kind of to blame for that as well, because the thing that they built themselves, they built that after a hands-on lab that I provided back in the days, which was kind of the first approach to this, and creating a hands-on lab to teach people how to do this. But we could just see that people were spending way too much time on maintaining and handling and all of these things. So that's the reason for, instead of maintaining and expanding a hands-on lab for these things, we started creating AL-Go for GitHub instead, and are using that ourselves as well. The BC apps repository with the system app and all of these things is using AL-Go. And also the Business Central apps private repository, where we have the pilot of the base application on GitHub, is also powered by AL-Go for GitHub. And obviously we had to add features to AL-Go for supporting these things, and we're also working with Alpaca and other partners to have their requirements and make sure that we support all of the things that they need.
No, that's good. And we're talking about AL-Go for GitHub, which is a set of templates within GitHub. Can you maybe talk a little bit more? We talked about managed solutions. We mentioned ALOps, Alpaca, and AL-Go, but maybe a little bit more of what that exactly is for someone that may not know. We're talking about, I know I talk with a lot of partners and even customers that are working with their own PTEs that are looking for ways to manage those extensions and make sure that they're compatible with the newer versions, and they run into some challenges. But maybe you can break down AL-Go in terms that someone can understand its position and what it is exactly doing and how it's of benefit.
Yeah, so AL-Go for GitHub is a plug and play DevOps solution for Business Central apps, either PTEs or app source apps. There's no real built-in support for on-premises solutions, but I know multiple partners who are using that for that as well. It's not something we are focusing on, but what we are focusing on is if you are a customer, if you are a partner that are building a PTE, typically, I don't know how things are in various places, but if a customer asks a partner to create a PTE for them, one option could be to have it in a shared repository where the customer actually can see what's going on, and the code ownership is for the customer. So the customer would basically give the partner access to a repository that they would create, and then the partner would create the code. The way to create the repository is really to use aka.ms/AL-Go PTE and say, yes, I want to create a repository. This is my repository, and then invite the partner to this repository. Now the partner can add the code, and already at that time, workflows and pipelines and release pipeline, everything is set up just by running that simple URL. And the only thing you need to do is basically add the code. Obviously, there can be dependencies that requires the partner to do some setup, but all in all should be fairly simple, at least that's what I think, and to set up. And some of the things we're working on now is NuGet support, so that if you have a dependency on other apps, then you can really just specify a NuGet feed from that partner, or maybe get symbols from Microsoft to use when you build the apps. So trying to make it as easy as possible for people to just always have CI/CD set up out of the box without having to ever change a YAML file, change a PowerShell script, or install Docker locally. Eventually, we want to have it integrated to GitHub code spaces as well. So you can go into your repository and say edit in code spaces, and it's going to open VS Code for you right there in your browser, and you can edit that, and you can test it out in an online environment or stuff like that. All of that should be like plug and play, and really you can do that almost on your TV if you have a keyboard, right?
Development has sure changed for this application over the years. I go way back to the old Cal days of I started working with version 1.1, and the changes that have come around over the past 20-something years are impressive. So AL-Go is a set of templates to help manage and deploy extensions that are created for Business Central, whether they're apps for AppSource, or if a customer has a PTE, or even if a partner is doing a PTE for a customer.
Templates might be a wrong word.
Say again, please. Okay.
Templates might be a wrong word. It really is a starting point. It is a template per se, but it also contains a workflow called update AL-Go system files, meaning that it's really the same as updating your Windows. So when you install Windows, you get like monthly update of Windows, and you always have the latest version. And that's one of the things that's built into AL-Go for GitHub, that we release versions like continuously, and people can upgrade their current workflows to the latest version just by running that script and applying whatever stuff they have in their own repository there. Where typically a template would be a starting point, and then you're kind of off to yourself to then maintain it afterwards, right?
Okay, I understand. And then with the AL-Go within the workflows will do things such as check for changes or breaking changes with compatible versions. Are there any configurations that need to be done for that, or is that all part of the base setup after you do the initial?
That's part of the base setup. But so if you just add code to AL-Go for GitHub, it will build the code whenever you check in changes. There's a pull request handler set up so that if you create pull requests, then you'll have to like do code reviews and stuff like that, and then you merge the pull request. It's going to do a build. If you don't have any releases, it doesn't know what old version to check for. But the moment you then create a release of your app, AL-Go will automatically check for compatibility with the latest released version of your app, like inside the repository. So there you will have breaking change check all the time. Also, if you write...
That word gives me nightmares, by the way. I'm just letting you... I hear breaking change and I just cringe.
And And also, if you have a test app, it will automatically run the test app and show the results of the test. If you have BCPT tests, like performance test toolkit tests, they can be set up to run automatically as well within either all your builds or on a daily scheduled test to see whether your app regresses in performance. And also with the latest feature, page scripting and stuff like that, we're also looking to implement that. So basically, you'll be like recording your page scripting tests in the recorder, and then the YAML file that comes out of that, you'll check that into your repository, and we know that this is a page scripting thingy, and just execute that test and show the results as part of your pipeline. That's the way that we want to implement these new functionalities, is by saying, how can we make it as easy as possible for people? I mean, typically you'd have to, okay, what code do I need to write in order to run these page scripting tests against my container or my service tier or whatever? All of that, you don't have to do anything. You just check in the YAML file in maybe in a special folder, or maybe I don't know, but then we'll make sure that the tests get executed whenever you are running CI/CD or test current or test mix major or whatever.
You had mentioned a point where you could run and check you have your builds run daily to check, or you can have it run at intervals. Is there a configuration for that? And then also with that, you mentioned AL-Go is free. I know it's a free to use on GitHub, but is there a cost to run those workflows regularly, like within GitHub itself? Like what type of license or what type of GitHub setup does someone need to have? Because you can have variant versions of GitHub.
Yeah, so on GitHub, everything that is public is free, and everything that is private has a cost attached to it. So if you have a public repository, you can run as many workflows you want, and it doesn't cost you a dime. If you have private repositories, based on the SKU you buy, like you can buy, you can have the basic one. I can't remember it's called. So there's 2 SKUs for developers, and there's 3 SKUs for companies. The SKUs for companies is GitHub Enterprise, GitHub Teams. I can't remember what the free one is, but let's just say GitHub Free. In GitHub Free, you get 2,000 minutes of GitHub Actions for free, and after that you pay per minute you use your runners. You can use self-hosted runners if you prefer that. So you can set up a few runners and attach those to your AL-Go. That becomes a setup. That's something you need to do. Obviously, you can find documentation on how to do that. But whether you will save money on that or you'll save money on actually using the GitHub hosted runners, I don't know. We are working on making sure that all the builds are running on Linux. So whenever you are building stuff, we are running Linux, which is faster than the Windows runners, and it's half the price. So you can actually get a lot of builds done by using a Linux runner. The problem is that when we want to run tests, we kind of need a Windows agent because we need to create a Docker container to run the tests in. And we're investigating various ways of handling that to see whether we can run the test in an online environment. If you have a sandbox you don't need, then maybe you can use that. It actually speeds up things quite dramatically because you don't need to ever create a container, and everything can run Linux if you do that. So these are some of the things that we are working on, making as smooth as possible so that people can save money and time.
No, it's extremely important with the changes and with technology and with the updates coming readily for Business Central with the monthly updates as well as the twice a year waves. ensuring that the extensions are compatible and you won't have any of those breaking changes or other issues is important, as well as making sure your tests run properly. To me, that's important. I'm a big advocate for testing and test scripts because I have found countless errors. I don't want to say countless, but I found a number of errors with changes that have been made that if the tests weren't there, nobody would have caught, or that have even gone through a code review in a sense when someone is reviewing it. So those tests are helpful. So having the capacity to be able to do that easily for each pull request is important.
So we will run. So in AL-Go, you'll have a set of artifacts that you develop on. So typically, you'd have like I'm developing on. If I say I want to be compatible with version 23, I'll be developing on version 23 because then I'm sure I don't like use 24 features and suddenly become incompatible with the version that I'm working on. So if you're working on, let's say, version 23, this is the artifacts that you have a development container on, and that is the artifacts that is used for the CI/CD builds and the testing and all of that. Then there are three other workflows that are supplied by AL-Go. One called test current, one called test next minor, and one called test next major. Test current will actually say, okay, you are developing on version 23, but the current version is 24.4. So I'll run that workflow maybe on a daily schedule or maybe on a weekly schedule or whatever, and test your code against the current version of Business Central. And the next major and the next minor will do the same, just with the next minor meaning 24.5, and the next major would be 25.0, which all are available today as artifacts. Inside Artifact, you don't need this token or this key to unlock the inside artifacts. The workflows can automatically get them. You don't even need to accept the insider agreement because you never see that workflow. You're just running a test against it, and you'll never get a container that actually works with that. So these things are automatically supported out of the box to make sure that, like, you'll see errors that you normally would see 3 or 4 months from now if you're running the next major build and seeing there's a problem in that one. And that kind of, I'm hoping that people will run these on a schedule so that they kind of are more ready for when we ship the next major, and everybody are then like faster to get to the next version.
No, it's important. I see a number of customers receive those warnings when they have an update try to be applied, and it says, we can't apply the update because your extension's incompatible, and this will help. It's a proactive approach and a preventative approach that it reduces the risk of interruption to someone receiving an update or into their Business Central system, where if they don't update it, it doesn't get republished after they go outside of their window. One part of the AL-Go, which you were talking about, so with the AL-Go for GitHub, it can automatically deploy the apps to an environment as well. Is that correct? Will it automatically invite to a Sandbox or both Sandbox and Production, or can you target?
You can do both. You can also set up continuous deployment to a production environment. By default, if you if you point out that you want to deploy to an environment automatically, and you don't state anything in settings, it will reject if it's a production environment. It will do it if it's a Sandbox environment. But you can go into settings and say, deploy to prod, if that's the name of my production environment, say continuous deployment equals true. Then we will also do continuous deployment to the production environment. Not sure many customers and partners are ready for that one, but it's possible. It's not something that I should block from not happening. By default, it is not happening. So we're not going to override any customers' apps just by accident.
So, but if someone has a workflow that's stable and they want to reduce the risk of whomever's going to load extensions into their environment, they can go through this process and at least have it monitored, checked, or the workflow there, and then the sandbox environment can go before. Because I do know.
It's also important to see that there's two types of apps. There's PTEs and app source apps. We cannot deploy an app source app to a production environment from a CI/CD pipeline, because we can do it to a sandbox environment. There we'll deploy it as if we were using VS Code and deploying it into the dev scope. But you cannot deploy an app source app into the dev scope in production environment. So in a prod environment, you have to install it in the right way. And if it's an app source app, then we do support publishing to app source directly from AL-Go for GitHub. So you can set up that I do continuous delivery to app source, meaning that we will automatically submit it to validation, and thereafter actually even take it live in app source if you want to do that. But typically, if you don't state anything, it will be validated and set where you need to go into the partner center portal and say go live with this app, else it'll stay there. And if you now, the latest version, we also support preview of app source apps. And at that point in time, what we really do when we publish to app source without going live is to put it in preview. And people can now, from that production environment, install the preview if they like that. And then you can test it, you can go live, and then they can install the final version there.
So talking about that preview version of an app, is that something that partners can give to specific customers to test new functionality? Is that the focus for it, where you can give specific customers reference to a version or preview version to work with?
So when you publish an app to app source, it goes through like a validation process, and then if you have created what's called a flight code, then it's in preview for the people who has that flight code. You can give that to customers or partners, and they can then install the preview version of that app with that flight code, and then they can install the final version once that gets shipped.
Oh, that's good. That's a new feature. I've been hearing about that quite a bit, and it's also good for partners or anyone who has an app source to get some additional testing or functionality review for customers before releasing it to widespread use within it. You had mentioned when setting up GitHub repository for new PTE or a new app source app. Again, PTEs would be for customer environments. App source apps would go to app source. That you could run the AKMS PTE, load PTE. I forget what it was.
AL-Go PTE.
AL-Go PTE. I know there's two of them, one for apps and one's for PTE. What about for an existing repository? So now if someone's been working with an app source app or a PTE in a GitHub repository, is there a way to apply the AL-Go workflows to that repository, or is it better to create a new repository and copy in the code?
I haven't actually thought too much about applying. So there's a few ways of doing it. You can create a new repository, and then you can import the Git history from the old repository and basically get everything in there. But you can also, you can do that from Azure DevOps to GitHub. You can also take, I don't know if I have a documentation on that specific one. There are some in AL-Go. You can go to the documentation, the README. There are a few ways that it's documented on how to take an existing repository and make that into an AL-Go repository. Not sure that you can do that with a GitHub repository, or not sure it's documented. You can obviously do it, but I'll write that down on a piece of paper and then add that to the docs, because it is really just adding some files to your repository, and then AL-Go should more or less be able to take it from there.
No, that would be great if there's some documentation on that process or that situation for those partners or customers that are managing their code with source control, such as GitHub, and now with AL-Go becoming more and more popular to be able to add that to the repository. Speaking of AL-Go, and you mentioned the documentation, where can someone find more information on AL-Go? Where do they obtain AL-Go?
You find that in the GitHub repo.
In the GitHub repo for AL-Go, it's in it's in the Microsoft repo, and you can search for AL-Go and find it.
You can also do aka.ms/AL-Go workshop, which will take you to. It's an area in the AL-Go repo really, where there's some MD files that takes you through the workshop on how to set things up, how to do releasing versions, how to do a lot of things, and a lot of things that are not yet documented are there just as lines to be documented. So we're working on that. It's a continuous evolvement really of this, and whenever we get new ideas, it goes into the backlog, and we'll try to make that happen. We also have a few partners that contribute to AL-Go, which we are happy for. But obviously the idea is that most partners will just use it as a tool. Some partners, if they have the capacity to actually co-develop AL-Go with us, they are more than welcome to do that. The more the merrier. We are 3 people right now working on AL-Go for GitHub. Obviously me, and then 2 other guys, or a girl and a guy. And yeah, we'll be trying to keep up with all the requirements that are coming from partners and customers.
No, it's like drinking from a water hose, I call it, or a fire hose. Excuse me. It's the amount, and it's not just AL-Go. It's just with Business Central, the number of changes, number of features. Technology is advancing, customer requirements. It's it's everything's becoming easier, but it's also because it's easier, it's becoming faster. So it's almost like a cycle of. I feel like I'm constantly running to keep up, as I guess you could say. But having tools such as BCContainerHelper and AL-Go do facilitate that process where you don't have to become an expert in the workflows or creating Docker containers and downloading images and setting pieces up. The AL-Go workshop, I know you do a number of sessions for AL-Go, and I know in September upcoming to be Days of Knowledge US. Are you going to be attending Days of Knowledge in the United States?
I'll be there, and I have a few sessions about AL-Go and some of the things that we talked about here. Also some like getting started session and a more advanced session. And I'm also looking to see who's there to see if I can get some feedback from partners who are using it already to get some good ideas and what can we do better and what should we do differently. I'm always looking for that when I'm at conferences to get feedback on where people are struggling and where people are running into dead ends to make sure that we can do it better than we're doing already.
No, I understand. So in Days of Knowledge in the United States, you'll be having a workshop or a session on AL-Go. So if anybody who wants to get some hands-on or to learn a little bit more about it, they can also attend that conference.
There's no hands-on labs per se, but there's sessions.
Sessions where you walk through how to set up and use AL-Go, and then also be able to answer some questions, which will be good. I will be there. Kris is going to the Power Platform conference, so we switched on this one. Usually we go.
But that's the next week. You can go both places.
we got to spread ourselves.
Yes, no, it's also coast to coast. It's a stretch across the country for Kris to go and come back for the 2 conferences. Yeah. So and that's why I'll just do the Days of Knowledge United States one as well, because it gets a lot to fly back and forth all over the place. So it's becomes
quite a few Business Central conferences around the world these days.
Oh yes.
Oh, more than you can count right now.
Yeah, there's quite a few, and that's one of the questions I always have, or get asked, or I like to talk to him just about is, it's outside of the AL-Go or BC Container-Helpers. Like, which ones do you go to? Right, because you have Dynamic Minds, you have BC Tech Days, you have Directions EMEA, Directions Asia, Directions North America, Days of Knowledge, you have Dynamics user groups. So there's a lot of conferences, and there's a few others on there too. There's a lot of great information. It's just important to just strategize and plan so you get the right ones that you get the most out of it, which is important.
I've always I think I've attended every single Days of Knowledge conference there were.
Really?
Not Days of Knowledge. Every single Tech Days conferences. In all the years, I think I've went to Antwerp. And what I like about these technical conferences is really that not only will people, I mean, if you go into a session and you see a lot of stuff and you hear a lot of stuff, you're not going to remember everything, right? But you're going to get you're going to see, you'll have an overview of what's possible, and you know where to look, and you'll start thinking about how to do things smarter. So going to conferences and learning technical stuff, I think, is something that partners should prioritize for their people, because people will really be much more innovative if they know more about what's possible and what's coming and what's trending and all of these things. You will get people's mind working, and not only their hands and feet, but your people will be much more satisfied, right? So I cannot stress enough that partners should really send their technical people to technical conferences and learn stuff. It is important.
I agree with you. It's absolutely important. It's important to also for the to support their customers. So it gets the technical talent that they have, whether it be functional consultants or developers that go to these, or even solution architects, whatever roles you have, as you mentioned on the, what I'll call more on the implementation side, just so that they know what's aware, they know what's possible, they know what's coming, so they can solution Business Central better, or also, implement it a bit better. So that they can know what to expect and what's going on.
So it's interesting that we have a Days of Knowledge in America now. I hope there's going to be a lot of attendance. So I hope it's something that's going to be a recurring event. Obviously, the Directions Committee cannot run sessions in the US if only 2 guys show up. I assume there are more than 2 guys. So
I'm hopeful they will be. I mean, it's the first year, so hopefully they'll have enough of an attendance.
We'll do this again.
Yes, I'm hopeful for that too, because I do feel that we need to have those technical conferences, or those technical tracks at conferences, where consultants, those that are in the field, as I'll say, can get a good look at what is there, what is coming, and also see how to do some things. As you had mentioned, it gets me thinking when I go to see some of these sessions and conferences of how to solution better, which is extremely important. Well, Freddy, thank you for taking the time to talk with us today about BC Container and AL-Go. I'm going to go back now and play with it again myself. I just want to try some new things. Every time I follow everything that you put. I follow the AL-Go. I follow the BC ContainerHelper. As I had mentioned, I use it daily. Several times a day, I'm doing something with containers, even if I just need to do a quick test of something that it doesn't require.
It's a little easier than downloading the DVD and installing that and uninstalling the old version.
Yes. And sometimes it's where a sandbox environment may not be, again, because the whole, the online environments, if I have a sandbox as well too. But again, as you had mentioned, it's a lot easier to just spin up a Docker container sometimes in my work flow some days. So I appreciate the tools that your team has put together. I know personally it's simplified my days and helped a lot of customers as well too, because of that simplification. If someone wanted to learn more about BC Container AL-Go, there are GitHub repositories for both of them. And in that GitHub repository, if they have any questions, I know that you're very responsive to the issues, and then someone can keep up with the changes as well. If anyone else wanted to get in touch with you, if they had additional questions or feedback on AL-Go or BC ContainerHelper, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Typically, like if people have anything on BC ContainerHelper or AL-Go, it would be great questions or issues directly in the in the GitHub repos, right? The GitHub repo for AL-Go is github.com/Microsoft/AL-Go, and the GitHub repo for the BCContainerHelper is github.com/Microsoft/nav-containerhelper. So it's still, the repository is still called nav-containerhelper, but that's where everything is, and there's an issues box there where you can go and ask questions or whatever. Else, I mean, people are also free to shoot me an email, freddyk@microsoft.com. I'd be more than happy to answer, but be prepared that I might say, please create an issue here instead. It's easier to track issues like that on GitHub than it is to track where the heck is that email.
I agree.
I agree with you. And with that, if somebody has an issue or a question, I like seeing them in the issues because it may help others as well. Yep. Because if one person has a question, if one person thinks something there's an issue, it's a good place to go. Because I had something that I had an issue, I had some errors on that I saw on the issues list, and I was able to easily remedy without having to contact anybody. Yep. So having it in, there is some good use for that. So that response is welcomed, I think, by many. It's important for others to realize that on these GitHub repositories, that's a great resource as well. If you have questions, to look at through the history and to be able to search them. Hopefully GitHub will get a little better with the searching, but that's not our space for that. But again, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. I really appreciate it. I definitely look forward to seeing you in a few weeks at Days of Knowledge in the United States, and to also learn a little bit more about AL-Go while I'm there.
Looking forward as well. Thanks for inviting me, and have a nice trip to Vegas, Christopher.
Yeah, he gets to go to Vegas.
It's going to be a tough one.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is a good
tough.
Have a good one.
All right,
Thanks, Freddy.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Kris, for your time for another episode of In the Dynamics Corner Chair. And thank you to our guests for participating.
Thank you, Brad, for your time. It is a wonderful episode of Dynamics Corner Chair. I would also like to thank our guests for joining us. Thank you for all of our listeners tuning in as well. You can find Brad at developerlife.com. That is DVLPRLIFE.com. And you can interact with them via Twitter, DVLPRLIFE. You can also find me at matalino.io, MATALINO.io. And my Twitter handle is matalino16. And you can see those links down below in the show notes. Again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, and take care.